divorce papers were sitting on the kitchen counter next to my morning coffee. Not hidden. Not tucked away in some folder he thought I wouldn't find. Just there. Crisp white envelope. His law firm's logo stamped in the corner like he'd ordered a package and forgotten to hide the receipt. I stood in my robe, pregnancy test still warm in my hand, two pink lines staring up at me like they also wanted to know what kind of man leaves divorce papers next to the sugar bowl. I set the test face down on the counter. Then I picked up my coffee. Because I am not the kind of omega who screams. My name is Seo Hajun, and I have spent 3 years married to Kwon Daehyun, CEO of Kwon Group, the most powerful alpha in all of Seoul, and apparently, a man who couldn't even be bothered to tell me to my face that he was done with me. 3 years of early mornings alone, dinners gone cold, and a husband whose cologne I smelled more on his office chair than on his skin. 3 years of pretending our marriage was a slow burn instead of a slow death. And now this. I turned the pregnancy test back over. Still 2 lines. Still real. Of course, I thought. Of course it's now. I heard him before I saw him, the heavy, deliberate footsteps of a man who owned every floor he walked on. Daehyun appeared in the kitchen doorway in a tailored charcoal suit, phone already pressed to his ear, eyes skimming the room the way they always did. Over me. Past me. Through me. Like I was furniture he'd stopped noticing years ago. He didn't see the test in my hand. He didn't see me at all. Yes, he said into the phone, voice low and clipped. Have Attorney Park finalize everything by Friday. I want it clean. A pause. No, he doesn't need a reason. Just process it. I went very still. He doesn't need a reason. Daehyun ended the call, finally looked up, and offered me the kind of smile a man gives when he's already decided something and just hasn't announced it yet, polite, distant, and faintly guilty around the edges. You're up early, he said. So are you, I said. He glanced at the envelope on the counter. Something flickered behind his eyes. Not regret, not quite. More like relief that I'd already found it, so he didn't have to figure out how to bring it up between breakfast and his 8 a.m. meeting. Hajun. Is it someone else? I asked. The question came out calm, almost conversational. I was genuinely curious the way you're curious about a magician's trick even after the illusion is already ruined. Daehyun's jaw tightened. That's not what this is. Then what is it? He set his phone down on the counter, slow and deliberate, like he was preparing a boardroom presentation. Our arrangement was always conditional. You know that. The merger with the O family required a stable public image, and that window is closing. Things have shifted. I blinked. Shifted. The O family has a son, an alpha. The alliance would be stronger with... I'm going to stop you right there, I said pleasantly. Because I think what you're trying to say is that you want to trade me in for a business deal, and I want to make sure I understand that correctly before I decide how to feel about it. His scent shifted sandalwood and cold authority, the signature of a man unused to being interrupted. His eyes narrowed slightly. You're being dramatic. I'm being precise, I said. There's a difference. He picked his phone back up. Discussion apparently over. Attorney Park will contact you this week. You'll be taken care of financially. I'm not unreasonable. Taken care of, like I was a restaurant bill. I watched him move toward the door, perfectly composed, already mentally in his next meeting. My fingers curled around the pregnancy test in my robe pocket. 2 lines. His air, his blood. You growing in my body while he arranged my exit like a calendar event. I thought about calling after him. I thought about throwing the test at the back of his perfectly styled head. Instead, I stood in that quiet kitchen in our apartment on the 42nd floor of a building that looked out over the Han River, and I breathed through my nose until the wave passed. Then I thought about the 3 men I'd met 6 weeks ago at a conference in Busan, the ones Daehyun called his greatest rivals, his most dangerous competitors, The only alphas in Korea who made him clench his teeth just hearing their names. The Jang triplets. Jang Minjae. Jang Siwon. Jang Taeoh. I thought about the business card Taeoh had pressed into my hand at the hotel bar. His dark eyes steady and unbothered, while Siwon laughed beside him, and Minjae watched me with that quiet, measuring look that made my pulse do something it had no business doing. If you ever need anything, Taeoh had said simply, call. At the time, I'd slipped the card into my bag and thought nothing of it. I pulled it out of my robe pocket. Now I'd been carrying it around for weeks without knowing why, and looked at it for a long moment. The pregnancy test in one hand, the business card in the other. 2 pink lines, 3 alpha rivals, 1 very clean divorce. I tilted my head, turned toward the window, and watched the Han River catch the morning light below. Well, I thought, let's see how clean this gets. And I called Taeoh at 7:43 in the morning. He picked up on the second ring, which told me either he was already awake and working, or he slept with his phone in his hand like a man who expected the world to need him at inconvenient hours. Knowing what I did about the Jang triplets, it was probably both. Seo Hajun. His voice was low, unhurried, like a man who had nowhere to be, even when he had everywhere to be. I was wondering when you'd call. I paused. Oh, you were expecting this? I was expecting something, he said. You had that look in Busan. What look? The one people get when they're deciding whether to burn something down or walk away from it quietly. A beat. I'm glad you didn't walk away quietly. I looked down at the pregnancy test still sitting on the kitchen counter. Outside, Seoul was waking up in layers, the Han River glittering cold and indifferent 42 floors below me. I need a place to stay, I said. I could temporarily. How temporary? Until I figure out how to detonate my husband's entire life plan in a way that is legally sound and personally satisfying. There was a short silence. Then, somewhere in the background, I heard a voice that sounded like Siwon say something sharp and amused, and Taeoh replied in a murmur too low to catch. Our guest suite has been empty for a while, Taeoh said. Come today. I haven't packed yet. Pack light. We'll handle the rest. I almost laughed. You don't even know what you're agreeing to. Hajun. His voice dropped half a register, and something about the way he said my name, like it was a complete sentence on its own, made my chest do something inconvenient. I know exactly what I'm agreeing to. Come today. I hung up. Then I stood in the kitchen for exactly 4 seconds before I went to go pack the most strategically selected bag of my entire life. The Jang triplets lived in a private estate in Seongbuk-dong, but the kind of old money Seoul neighborhood where the trees were older than most corporations, and the houses sat behind walls that didn't need security signs because everyone already knew. I took a cab because I was not touching anything Daehyun owned or paid for this morning, including the car with his name on the insurance. The gate opened before I could press the intercom button. Minjae was standing at the entrance when I came through, hands in his pockets, dressed like he'd just finished a morning run and hadn't bothered to be impressed by that fact. He was the quietest of the three, the one who'd watched me in Busan with those careful, dark eyes like he was reading something the rest of the room hadn't noticed yet. He looked at my bag, then at my face. You look like you had an interesting morning, he said. I found divorce papers next to my coffee maker, I said. So interesting is one word for it. Something shifted in his expression, eyed quick and controlled, before he stepped aside to let me in. The others are inside. The interior of the Jang estate was exactly what I expected from 3 alphas who had collectively decided to make Kwon Daehyun's professional life miserable for the better part of a decade. Expensive, minimal, and deeply intimidating without appearing to try. Floor-to-ceiling windows, clean architectural lines, the kind of quiet that felt intentional rather than empty. Siwon was in the main room, leaning against a kitchen island with a coffee mug and the energy of someone who found almost everything mildly entertaining. He was the loudest of the 3, the one who'd laughed freely in Busan while his brothers maintained their composure. and he looked at me now with bright eyes and zero pretense. Seo Hajun, he said warmly. Welcome to the enemy camp. Thank you, I said. I've brought classified information and a complicated personal situation. Perfect, he said. We were getting bored. Taeoh appeared from the hallway, no phone in hand for once, and something about seeing all three of them in the same room with their combined alpha presence pressing gently against the air made my secondary gender instincts do a slow, embarrassing somersault that I immediately told to sit down and behave. These were Daehyun's rivals. I was technically still his husband, and I was pregnant with his child, which nobody in this room knew yet, and which I was going to need to think very carefully about before I let that particular piece of information loose in a house full of alphas with their own agendas. Taeoh looked at me steadily. Are you all right? Physically, I said. Emotionally, I am operating on coffee and spite, but I've functioned on worse. The corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile, but close enough. Minjae had followed me in and now stood slightly to my left. Close enough that I caught the edge of his scent without meaning to. Cedar and something darker. Something calm. It was annoyingly grounding. You should eat, he said quietly, before anything else. I opened my mouth to say I wasn't hungry. My stomach made a sound that directly contradicted that statement with absolutely no loyalty to my dignity whatsoever. Siwon burst out laughing. And just like that, somehow, the tension in my chest cracked open just slightly, enough to breathe through. And I thought maybe, just maybe, I had not made the worst decision of my life this morning. I thought that. Then my phone buzzed. Daehyun's name lit up the screen. And below it, a message that made every calm thought I'd just managed evaporate completely. I know where you are. I stared at the message for 3 full seconds. I know where you are. No punctuation, no explanation. Just 6 words sitting on my screen like a quiet threat wearing a business casual outfit. I turned my phone face down on the kitchen island. Everything okay? Siwon asked, still holding his coffee mug. Though his tone had shifted slightly, the humor dialed back just enough to let something sharper through. Perfectly fine, I said. My husband just texted to let me know he has my location, which is either a threat or the saddest attempt at reconciliation I've ever seen. All 3 of them went still. Not dramatically. Not in the way people go still in movies. Eyes with wide eyes and sharp inhales. The Jang triplets went still the way a city goes quiet right before something significant happens. Gradual. Deliberate. Like the air itself decided to pay attention. Taeoh was the first to move. He crossed the room in measured steps, picked up my phone without asking, and read the message. His expression didn't change. He set the phone back down and looked at Minjae. Something passed between them without a single word. He has someone watching the building, Minjae said. It wasn't a question. Probably has had someone watching it since she filed the prenup review last month, Siwon said, and I turned to look at him. How do you know about the prenup review? Siwon had the decency to look mildly caught before he recovered. We know a lot about Kwon Daehyun's business arrangements. I am not a business arrangement, I said pleasantly. No, Taeoh said, and his voice was quiet enough that I actually paid attention to it. You're not. Which is exactly why he's already panicking. He looked at me directly. He filed the divorce papers before he knew what your next move was. Now you've made one, and he doesn't like it. I considered that. Daehyun panicking was not something I had significant experience with. In 3 years of marriage, I had watched him handle corporate crises, hostile takeovers, and one very memorable shareholder revolt with the same temperature he used to order takeout. The idea that 6 words from him meant he was rattled was almost flattering. Almost. He's going to come here, I said. He's going to try, Siwon said, and the way he said try was deeply satisfying in a way I didn't want to examine too closely. Minjae moved to the window, glancing toward the street below with that quiet, methodical attention of his. Silver sedan, parked across from the east gate, It was there when you arrived. I hadn't even noticed. I took a cab, I said. I didn't think he'd move this fast. He's not moving fast because he misses you, Taeoh said, and there was something almost careful in his voice, like he was handling something breakable. He's moving fast because you have information. You know things about his financials, his merger timeline, his arrangements with the O family. A spouse walking out the morning after divorce papers appear is a liability. The word liability landed somewhere uncomfortable in my chest. Not because it hurt exactly. More because it confirmed what I'd already known and had spent 3 years occasionally pretending wasn't true. To Daehyun, I was a variable. I had always been a variable. I pressed my hand flat against the kitchen island and breathed out slowly. Then I picked my phone back up, opened Daehyun's message, and typed back. Good morning to you too. I had coffee. Did you? Siwon read over my shoulder and made a sound that was half laugh and half disbelief. You are something else. I'm an Omega who grew up in a family of corporate lawyers, I said. I learned very early that the best response to a power move is a completely unbothered one. My phone buzzed again almost immediately. Come home. We can discuss this like adults. I read it. Showed it to Taeoh, who was standing close enough now that I caught his scent without meaning to. Warm amber and something like rainfall. Grounded and steady. My Omega instincts noted it with irritating enthusiasm, and I noted my Omega instincts with firm disapproval. He wants to talk, I said. He wants to control the conversation, Taeoh said. Same thing with Daehyun, I said. I typed back, I am being completely adult. Adults are allowed to visit friends. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. And then, those men are not your friends, Hajun. I stared at that message for a moment, and something cold and clarifying moved through me. Not anger. Something cleaner than anger. Something that felt a lot like the moment a decision stops being a question. He wasn't worried about me. He was worried about what I might tell them. He was worried about what I already knew. 3 years of watching him build his empire from the inside, knowing which deals were clean and which ones weren't. Knowing which alliances were genuine and which were constructed to look good from the outside. He wasn't texting because he wanted his husband back. He was texting because I was dangerous. I set the phone down. Looked at Taeoh, then Siwon, then Minjae at the window with his quiet, watchful eyes. I need to tell you something, I said, and my voice came out steadier than I expected. About why Daehyun actually wants this divorce. I paused. And about why his timeline just got significantly more complicated. All 3 of them turned to look at me. I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out the pregnancy test, set it on the kitchen island where the morning light hit it clearly. 2 lines. Still pink. Still devastatingly real. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I'd heard all morning. The silence stretched exactly 4 seconds longer than comfortable. Siwon was the first to find his voice, which tracked, because Siwon always found his voice first. He looked at the test, then at me, then back at the test like he was waiting for it to say something different. That's, he started. 2 lines, I confirmed. Yes. And Daehyun doesn't know, Minjae said from the window. He hadn't moved, but his eyes had shifted from the street below to my face with that particular quality of attention that made me feel like he was reading the footnotes of whatever I was saying. I found out this morning, I said. Approximately 15 minutes before I found the divorce papers next to the coffee maker, so no, he does not know. Taeoh was looking at me with an expression I couldn't fully read. Not pity, which I appreciated more than I could say. Not calculation either, which I appreciated even more. It was something quieter than both. Something that felt a lot like he was reorganizing information and taking his time about it. Sit down, he said finally. I'm fine standing. Hajun. The way he said my name again, that same quality, like it had weight and he wasn't afraid to use it, made me pull out a bar stool and sit down without entirely meaning to. I told myself it was because my feet were tired from the cab ride. I was not entirely convincing. Siwon refilled a coffee mug and pushed it toward me without asking, then seemed to remember something and pulled it back. Should you be drinking coffee? I looked at him. Right, he said. Oh, rude question. Forget I said that. He pushed the mug back. Drink it if you want. I want, I said, and wrapped both hands around it. Minjae finally left the window and came to stand at the end of the island, arms crossed, that quiet, thoughtful stillness of his filling the space around him the way cedar smoke fills a room. Gradual and impossible to ignore. Walk us through it, he said. The divorce timeline. What did the papers say exactly? Standard dissolution filing, I said. Yes, irreconcilable differences. Asset division based on the original prenuptial agreement, which I signed 3 years ago when I was 24 and in love, and had not yet developed my current healthy sense of personal skepticism. I paused. The prenup has a clause. If I initiate any public conflict or contact media during proceedings, I forfeit the settlement. He built a silence clause into the prenup, Taeoh said. He built a cage into the prenup, I said. I can call it a clause. Something moved through Taeoh's expression, sharp and controlled. There's more, Minjae said. Not a question. He was watching my face. I set the mug down. The merger with the O family. Daehyun needs it finalized within 60 days, or the Kwon Group loses its primary pharmaceutical distribution license. The O family's son, the alpha he mentioned this morning, he's been positioned as the replacement alliance partner. A new bond. I clean optics. I looked at all three of them. Daehyun needs me gone and quiet before the merger announcement. The pregnancy changes his entire timeline because an Omega carrying the Kwon heir has legal standing he cannot simply dissolve with paperwork. The room processed that. Siwon let out a slow breath. So, you're not just a liability. You're a structural problem in his entire corporate strategy. Congratulations to me, I said. Taeoh moved around the island and stopped closer than he'd stood before. His alpha scent was stronger at this distance, warm amber deepening into something steadier, and my body had about 15 immediate opinions about that which I filed away under things to examine never. What do you want? He asked. Straightforward. No performance in it. I looked up at him. What? Not what you need to do legally. Not what protects the baby or damages Daehyun's merger. His eyes stayed on mine. What do you want? Nobody had asked me that. Not Daehyun, not my family, who'd thought the Kwon marriage was the best possible outcome for an unbonded Omega from a mid-tier family. Not Attorney Park, who'd sent 3 emails this morning about procedural timelines that I hadn't answered yet. I turned the coffee mug slowly in my hands. I want him to feel what it's like, I said quietly, to have someone make a major decision about his life without consulting him. I want the merger to fall apart, not because I screamed about it, but because I was smarter than his silence clause. And I want my child to never spend a single day thinking they were the reason their father panicked. Nobody spoke. Then Siwon said, very sincerely, I think I would follow you into battle. Minjae made a sound that might have been agreement. From Minjae, it was practically a standing ovation. Taeoh held my gaze for one more moment before he stepped back and pulled out his own phone. I'm calling our legal team. If Daehyun has a silence clause, there are 3 ways to invalidate it under Korean family law, and I want all 3 on the table by noon. My phone buzzed on the counter. Daehyun again. This time, no text, just a call, his name filling the screen, and underneath it the small, a pulsing indication that it had already been ringing for several seconds while I'd been sitting here deciding what I wanted. I looked at it. I looked at Taeoh. Should I answer? I asked. Taeoh glanced at the screen, then at me. The corner of his mouth moved, just slightly. Answer it, he said, and put it on speaker. I smiled for the first time all morning. It was not a particularly warm smile. I picked up the phone. Hajun. Daehyun's voice came through the speaker smooth and controlled, the same voice he used in boardrooms when he wanted everyone to believe the situation was already resolved. Come home. Whatever you think you're doing right now, it isn't necessary. I looked at Taeoh across the kitchen island. He gave me one small, steady nod. I'm having coffee, I said into the phone. It's very good coffee, actually. And Sungbukdong has excellent water pressure, too. The guest suite is lovely. A pause, short and sharp, like a paper cut. You're making a mistake, Daehyun said. I make at least one mistake a day, I said pleasantly. Keeps life interesting. Speaking of interesting, Attorney Park sent me 3 emails this morning. I haven't responded yet. I've been busy. Hajun. His voice dropped, and underneath the control there was something else now. Not warmth. Something tighter. Those men are using you. Whatever they've offered you, whatever they've said, it's designed to damage me. You are a tool to them, nothing more. The word tool settled in the room like a stone dropped in still water. I watched the ripple move across Siwon's expression first, his easy energy pulling back into something harder. Minjae's jaw shifted slightly. Taeoh's eyes stayed on me, steady and dark, waiting to see what I would do with it. I breathed in once through my nose. That's interesting, I said. Coming from the man who built a silence clause into our prenuptial agreement and scheduled my removal from his life around a merger timeline. Dead silence on the line. It lasted long enough that I checked the screen to confirm the call was still connected. It was. Who told you about the merger timeline? Daehyun said, and it wasn't a question anymore. His voice had gone very quiet, which anyone who knew him understood was significantly more dangerous than loud. You did, I said. Like you've been taking calls at the dining table for 6 months, Daehyun. Did you think I stopped having ears? Another silence. Different quality this time. The kind that meant he was recalculating. Taeoh's phone was already in his hand, and I could see from the angle that he was typing, passing information to someone I couldn't see, moving pieces on a board Daehyun didn't know existed yet. Come home, Daehyun said again, softer now. And something about the shift in register made my chest ache in a way I resented deeply. 3 years of marriage lived in that register. Early mornings before he became unreachable. The version of him I'd thought was real before I understood it was just another presentation. No, I said. Hajun. I'm not coming home, I said, and I need you to hear this clearly, so I'm going to say it slowly. I kept my voice level, unhurried, the way my father used to argue cases. I am not going to sign anything, say anything, or disappear quietly on your schedule. Whatever you have planned with the O family, whatever your 60-day window looks like right now, I would strongly suggest you build in some flexibility. The silence that followed was the longest one yet. Then Daehyun said very quietly, "What are you not telling me?" Not a question, a recognition. The sound of a man who had just felt the ground shift under a foundation he thought was solid. I picked up the pregnancy test from the counter where it was still sitting in the morning light. I looked at it for one long moment. Then I set it back down and said nothing. Because here was something I had learned from 3 years of watching Kwon Daehyun operate. He was brilliant in a crisis he could see. He was catastrophically underprepared for the ones he couldn't. Let him wonder. Right, let him sit in that Seoul apartment on the 42nd floor with the Han River outside the window and feel exactly what it was like to know that something significant was happening and have absolutely no control over it. I'll have my own attorney contact yours, I said. Have a good morning. I ended the call. The kitchen was very quiet for exactly 2 seconds. Then Siwon said, I want to be you when I grow up. You're older than me, I said. No, I don't care. Minjae was watching me with that particular expression of his, the one that felt less like observation and more like comprehension. Like he wasn't just seeing what I'd done, but understanding why, and filing it somewhere careful. You didn't tell him about the pregnancy, he said. No. Why? I set the phone face down on the counter and pulled the coffee mug back toward me. Because right now, it's the only card I have that he doesn't know exists. Once he knows, he'll lawyer up around it immediately. He'll find a way to use it as leverage against me instead of the other way around. I wrapped both hands around the mug. I need to move first. File something, establish something, create a legal fact on the ground before he has time to reshape the narrative. Taeoh looked up from his phone. Our legal team can have a protective filing ready within 4 hours. Establishes your residential status, documents the pregnancy through a clinic we trust, and creates a formal record that predates any counterfiling Daehyun attempts. I stared at him. You can do that in 4 hours? We've been preparing to dismantle Kwon Daehyun's infrastructure for 2 years, Taeoh said simply. We just didn't expect the opportunity to walk through our front gate carrying a pregnancy test. Something about the way he said it, direct and without apology, made warmth move through my chest that I was completely unprepared for. Minjae's hand came to rest on the counter near mine. Not touching. Just close. Cedar and calm pressing gently against the edges of my anxiety. You're not doing this alone, he said quietly. I looked at his hand, then his face. I wanted to say something sharp and self-sufficient about how I was perfectly capable of managing alone. Instead, what came out was, okay. Just that. Siwon's phone rang suddenly, cutting through the moment. And he glanced at the screen and his expression changed completely. It's our inside contact at Kwon Group, he said, eyes sharp. He's calling on the emergency line. All 3 triplets went still. Answer it, Taeoh said. Siwon did. And the voice on the other end said 4 words that made every plan we'd just constructed feel suddenly, terrifyingly small. Daehyun knows about everything. Daehyun knows about everything. Those 4 words sat in the middle of the kitchen like something combustible. Siwon put the call on speaker without being asked. The voice on the other end belonged to someone who sounded young, slightly breathless, and deeply unhappy about whatever he was about to say next. He knows about the Jang Group's shadow acquisition of Kwon Pharmaceuticals, the voice said. He has documentation. Someone on the inside leaked the holding structure 2 hours ago. He's already called an emergency board meeting for this afternoon, and his legal team has been in the building since 6 a.m. Taeoh's expression didn't crack, not even slightly, but I watched his hand tighten once around his phone before he set it flat on the counter with controlled precision. Who leaked it? Minjae said. Not loudly. The quieter his voice got, I was learning, the more serious the situation was. We don't know yet. Find out, Minjae said, and ended that thread of the conversation as cleanly as closing a door. Siwon looked at his brothers. Something moved between the 3 of them. That wordless triplet communication that I'd caught edges of since arriving, full sentences passing in the space of a glance. Then they all looked at me. I held up one hand. Before anyone says anything about me leaving the room or being kept out of this conversation, I want to point out that I am the most motivated person in this building right now. My child's future is sitting on the same table as your acquisition. So whatever you're about to discuss, I'm part of it. Another one of those silent triplet exchanges. Taeoh said, Sit down, Hajun. I'm already sitting. Then stay sitting. He pulled up something on his phone and turned the screen toward me. It was a corporate structure diagram, layered and dense, in with the Kwon Group in the center and a web of subsidiary connections branching outward. Near the bottom, almost invisible in the structure's lower tier, was a holding company name I recognized. JT Holdings. I had seen that name once. On a document sitting on Daehyun's desk 14 months ago. A document he'd closed his laptop over when I walked into the study with his evening tea. JT Holdings is yours, I said. It's how we've been acquiring Kwon Pharmaceuticals shares quietly for 18 months, Taeoh said. Small enough percentages that it stayed under the disclosure threshold. By next quarter, we would have had controlling interest without Daehyun ever seeing it coming. But now he sees it coming, I said. Now he sees it coming, Siwon confirmed, dropping onto the stool beside me with considerably less of his usual lightness. No, which means he's going to move the pharmaceutical assets into a protected subsidiary before we can finalize anything. 18 months of work, gone in an afternoon board meeting. I looked at the diagram, looked at the JT Holdings node sitting at the bottom of it. Then I looked at the name printed in small text beside it. "Why is my name on this holding company?" I said. The silence that followed was a distinctly different quality from all the previous silences. This one had texture. It had weight. It had the particular density of three alphas who had just been caught in something they had not yet decided how to explain. Siwon looked at the ceiling. Minjae looked at his hands. Taeoh looked directly at me, which I was beginning to understand was his default when the situation called for honesty, that he would rather not perform, but would anyway. "When we established JT Holdings," he said carefully, "we needed a secondary name on the registration. Someone connected to the Kwon family orbit who could provide legitimate cover for the holding structure. 18 months ago, before we understood your situation fully, we used your name. It was a legal formality. I processed that." "You used my name," I said slowly, "on a shell company designed to secretly dismantle my husband's pharmaceutical empire." "Yes." "Without asking me?" "Yes." "So, technically," I said, "I am already a participating member of a corporate conspiracy against Kwon Daehyun, which means the silence clause in my prenup is already compromised, which means Daehyun's legal team is going to find my name on that document and use it to paint me as a co-conspirator in hostile acquisition proceedings, which destroys my protective filing, my settlement, and any clean legal standing I have going into a custody situation." The silence confirmed everything. I pressed both hands flat on the counter and breathed through my nose. "I want to be angry," I said conversationally, "and I will be, later, in a dedicated and thorough way. But right now, I need to think." I looked at Taeoh. "Does Daehyun's team have the full document or just the holding structure?" "The structure. The full registration documents are in a secure archive." "How long until they find the full registration?" Taeoh glanced at Minjae. 6 hours. Maybe 8. Then we have 6 hours to make my presence on that document look intentional and strategic rather than fraudulent. I straightened up. "Get your legal team on the phone, and I need access to every financial record connected to JT Holdings that has my name on it." Siwon stared at me. "You're not going to yell at us?" "I told you, I'll yell later. It'll be very thorough. You should prepare yourself emotionally." I held out my hand toward Taeoh. "Phone, legal team. Now." Something moved through Taeoh's expression that I didn't have a name for yet. It wasn't quite surprise. It was something that looked almost like the moment a person realizes they have significantly underestimated someone they thought they'd already measured correctly. He handed me his phone. His fingers brushed mine as he did, warm and unhurried, and he didn't move his hand away immediately. Neither did I. For exactly 1 second, neither of us moved. And then Minjae's voice came from across the room, quiet and precise as always. "There's a car at the gate," he said. "Black sedan, Kwon group plates." Every warm thing in the room evaporated. Siwon was already at the window. 2 men, suits, and... He stopped. "And what?" I said. He turned from the window and his expression, for the first time since I'd arrived, held something that looked genuinely like concern. "Daehyun is with them," he said, "and he came himself." Daehyun came himself. I stood in the middle of the Jang kitchen holding Taeoh's phone and processed that information with the particular clarity that arrives when your body understands the stakes before your brain catches up. Kwon Daehyun did not make house calls. He sent attorneys. He sent assistants. He sent carefully worded documents delivered by people paid to absorb the discomfort of delivering them. The fact that he had driven to Seongbuk-dong himself, and with 2 suited men and his Kwon group plates visible from the window, meant that whatever he knew had rattled him badly enough to break his own protocol. Good. And also terrifying. "Don't open the gate," I said. We weren't planning to, Siwon said, still at the window. Taeoh was already on another call, voice low and rapid. Legal team activated. Minjae had moved to the security panel near the hallway entrance and was pulling up the gate camera feed on a small screen, beating his face unreadable as Daehyun's figure appeared in sharp resolution, standing outside the estate wall in a coat I recognized, the charcoal one he wore when he wanted to communicate authority without appearing aggressive. He knew about the cameras. He was performing for them. I moved to stand beside Minjae and looked at the screen. 3 years. I had spent 3 years waking up next to that man, learning the difference between his public face and his private one, memorizing the architecture of his moods, the way you memorize the layout of a house you live in so you can navigate it in the dark. And standing here watching him on a security feed outside someone else's gate, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not love. Not anymore. Or at least not the kind that asked me to go back. Something sadder than that. The particular grief of recognizing that the version of a person you loved most was always the one they showed you least. He looks calm, I said quietly. He's not, Minjae said, equally quiet. He pointed to the screen without touching it. His left hand. He does that when he's controlling something. I looked. Daehyun's left hand was moving at his side, a slow, rhythmic press of his thumb against his fingers. A private tell. A habit. Minjae noticed things about people the way other people noticed weather. Naturally, without effort, without making you feel observed. How do you know that about him? I said. I've watched him in 12 boardrooms over 4 years, Minjae said simply. The intercom at the gate crackled. Daehyun's voice came through it, clear and even. I'd like to speak with my husband. The word husband landed in the room with a strange weight. It was accurate. Technically, legally, in every recorded sense, it was still accurate. And he knew that. He was using it deliberately, reminding everyone present, including me, that whatever was happening here, I still had his name attached to mine. Taeoh finished his call and came to stand on my other side. 3 of them now, arranged around me with the kind of unhurried solidarity that made my chest feel something I didn't have time to examine. You don't have to talk to him, Taeoh said. I know, I said. But I want to. I reached past Minjae and pressed the intercom button myself. I can hear you fine from here, I said into it. The gate stays closed. A pause on the other end. They're short and controlled. Hajun. Daehyun's voice shifted register, and there it was again, that private frequency, the one that had made me trust him once. Whatever they've told you about JT Holdings, about the acquisition, it's not the full picture. You're being used as a legal buffer for a hostile takeover of my company. Your name is on documents you never signed with informed consent. That's fraud. And when this goes to litigation, you will be standing in the middle of it. I pressed the intercom again. I'm aware of the documents. Then you understand what your position is. My position, I said, is that I am an Omega whose name was used without consent on a corporate registration, which actually makes me a victim of procedural fraud rather than a participant in it. My attorneys are going to have a wonderful time with that distinction. Silence. Long enough that Siwon, behind me, it made a quiet sound of deep appreciation. You don't have attorneys, Daehyun said finally. Not one's equipped for this. I have 3 alphas with a legal team that's been preparing this case for 2 years, I said. I think I'll manage. Another silence. Different texture this time. Then Daehyun said, very quietly, in the voice he almost never used outside closed doors, come outside and talk to me. Just you and me. 2 minutes. And the terrible thing, the genuinely inconvenient thing, was that some part of me wanted to. Not because I trusted him. Not because 2 minutes would fix 3 years or a silence clause or divorce papers next to the coffee maker, but because I had something to tell him that no intercom should carry. Something that deserved to be said face to face, in real air, between 2 people who had once meant something to each other, even if that something had gone wrong somewhere along the way. I felt Taeoh's hand come to rest at the edge of my shoulder, but not gripping, just present. Hajun, he said, low enough that only I could hear it. You don't owe him a conversation. I know, I said. I looked at the security screen. Daehyun stood at the gate, still performing calm for the cameras, left hand moving against his side. I pressed the intercom one more time. Open the gate, I said. Hajun, Taeoh said sharply. Just the pedestrian door, I said. I'm going outside. I turned and looked at all three of them, steady and deliberate. Alone. The look on Taeoh's face was the closest thing to open emotion I had seen from him all morning. Minjae said nothing, but his eyes said several things in quick succession. Siwon looked like he wanted to physically block the door and was restraining himself through significant personal effort. I walked to the entrance hall anyway, because there was something Daehyun didn't know yet. And I had decided, like standing in that kitchen with a pregnancy test on the counter and 3 alphas at my back, exactly how and when he was going to find out. On my terms, not his. The morning air outside the Jang estate was cold and clean, the kind of Seoul winter air that clarifies everything it touches. I pulled my coat tighter and walked the short path to the pedestrian door, heard the quiet electronic click of it unlocking, and pushed it open. Daehyun was standing 3 feet away. Up close, without the security screen between us, he looked different than he had this morning in the kitchen. Still polished, still composed, still wearing authority the way other people wear cologne. But there were edges showing that the camera hadn't caught. A tightness around his eyes, a stillness in his shoulders that wasn't confidence but its very convincing cousin. His 2 suited men stood back near the car, far enough to signal this was personal, close enough to signal it wasn't entirely. Daehyun looked at me for a moment without speaking, the way he did when he was deciding which version of a conversation to have. You look cold, he said finally. I'm fine, I said. You left without a proper coat. I left without a lot of things, I said. Funny how divorce papers have that effect. He exhaled slowly through his nose. I handled this badly. I waited. The papers on the counter, he said. That was wrong. You deserved a conversation first. Was that an apology? I asked. I want to make sure I label it correctly for my records. Something flickered in his expression. Not quite amusement. Something more complicated. The particular expression of a man encountering a version of someone he thought he understood and finding that his understanding was incomplete. I'm trying to talk to you, he said. You're trying to manage me, I said. There's a difference. You came here because the JT holding structure rattled you and you want to assess how much I know before your board meeting this afternoon. The apology is real, but it's also strategic, and you're hoping I won't notice that both things are true at the same time. I tilted my head. I notice everything, Daehyun. I always have. You just stopped accounting for it. He was quiet for long enough that a car passed on the street behind him, its sound filling the silence and then leaving it emptier than before. What do you want? He said. An echo of Taeoh's question from inside, but different in texture. Where Taeoh had asked it openly, like an offered hand, Daehyun asked it like a man expecting a number he could negotiate against. I want you to hear something, I said. And I want you to hear it without immediately calculating how to use it. His eyes narrowed slightly. Hajun, I'm pregnant. The words came out clean and level, or the way I'd practiced them in my head during the walk down the path. No drama, no build-up. Just the fact, placed between us in the cold morning air like something that had always been true and was only now being acknowledged. Daehyun went completely still. Not the performance still from the security camera. Actually still, the kind that happens when a person's entire operating system encounters information it wasn't configured to process. I watched it move through him. Watched the boardroom composure flicker just once, like a light responding to a power surge. Watched something cross his face that was too unguarded to be strategic. A raw split second of something that looked almost like wonder before the control came back down over it. You're, he started. Pregnant, I confirmed. Approximately 6 weeks. Confirmed this morning, about 20 minutes before I found your paperwork. He took one step toward me and then stopped himself. So why didn't you tell me immediately? He said, and his voice had changed. The boardroom frequency gone, something unsteady underneath it. Because you were on the phone arranging my exit, I said. The timing felt awkward. Hajun. He said my name the way he used to, early in our marriage, before the distance, before the merger and the strategy and the version of himself he'd chosen over the version of us. It landed somewhere painful, and I let it. Because feeling it clearly was better than pretending it wasn't there. This changes everything. It changes your timeline, I said. It changes your merger optics. It changes your legal position and your board's expectations and your arrangement with the O family. I held his gaze. But it does not change what you did this morning. And it does not change the fact that you built a cage into our prenup and were planning to walk away from this marriage without ever looking back. He opened his mouth. I'm not finished, I said quietly. He closed it. I am not going to disappear, I said. I am not going to be quiet or compliant or grateful for whatever financial arrangement your attorney prepares. I am carrying your heir, and I am standing in front of your greatest rival's home. And I have 3 alphas with a legal team that has been preparing to dismantle your corporate structure for 2 years. I paused. So I need you to make a decision right now, not a strategic one, a real one. The cold air moved between us. Daehyun's left hand was still at his side, still pressing his thumb against his fingers, slow and rhythmic. What kind of decision? He said. The kind where you figure out whether you actually want to be a father, I said. Or whether you want to spend the next 18 years explaining to your child why you chose a pharmaceutical merger over the morning you found out they existed. His jaw tightened. His eyes didn't leave mine. And for the first time in 3 years, I watched Kwon Daehyun look at me like he was actually seeing me. Not a variable, not a liability, not a strategic consideration. Just me. Standing in the cold outside someone else's gate, holding the most important card in the game, refusing to fold. Maybe behind me, I heard the quiet sound of the estate door opening. I didn't turn around, but I felt it. The warm amber and rainfall presence of Taeoh stepping into the doorway, close enough to be visible, far enough to be a choice. Daehyun's eyes moved past my shoulder. Something shifted in them when they landed on Taeoh. Not just rivalry, something older than that. Something that looked almost like fear. Daehyun looked at Taeoh for a long moment. Then he looked back at me. And something in him, some load-bearing wall he'd been maintaining for years, came down quietly, without drama, the way things collapse when they've been holding too much for too long. I don't know how to do this, he said. Not to the situation. To me. Directly, in the voice he almost never used, the one without armor in it. I know, I said. I handled everything wrong. You did, I agreed. Spectacularly. The corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile. Something more honest than a smile. Yes, the merger with the O family. I was going to tell you. When? A pause. After. After you'd already filed. Yes. I nodded slowly. That's what I thought. I pulled my coat tighter against the cold. I'm not asking you to beg, Daehyun. I'm not asking for a grand gesture or a dramatic reversal. I'm asking you to be honest with me right now, in this street, with no attorneys and no strategy. Do you want this child? He didn't hesitate. Yes? Do you want me? This pause was longer. The honest kind of long, not the calculating kind. I stopped knowing how to want you, he said quietly. Somewhere between the merger negotiations and the board expectations and the version of myself I kept agreeing to be. I stopped knowing how to come home and just be a person with you. His eyes dropped briefly, then came back up. That's not an excuse. It's just the truth you asked for. It was the most honest thing he'd said to me in 2 years. No, it cracked something open in my chest that I hadn't given him permission to crack. I breathed through it. Go cancel your board meeting, I said. Tell Attorney Park to hold everything, and then go home and think about what you actually want your life to look like. Not your portfolio, your life. He searched my face. And you? I'll be here, I said. But I'm not coming back to that apartment until things are different. Actually different, not strategically different. He nodded once, like slow and real. Then he did something I genuinely had not prepared for. He reached out, carefully, giving me every opportunity to step back, and when I didn't, he pressed his hand gently against my jaw, just for a moment, the way he used to before everything became complicated. I'm sorry, he said, for the papers by the coffee maker, for all of it. I let myself feel that for exactly 1 second. Then I stepped back. I know, I said. He dropped his hand, looked past me at Taeoh one more time, that something unreadable passing between them. Some alpha acknowledgement I wasn't entirely privy to. Then he turned, walked back to his car, and left without another word. I stood in the cold street watching the black sedan disappear around the corner of the Seongbuk-dong tree line. Then I turned around. Taeoh was in the doorway. Behind him, I could see Siwon leaning against the hallway wall with his arms crossed and the expression of a man who had listened to every word through the door and was completely unapologetic about it. Minjae stood slightly behind Taeoh, quiet as always, watching me with those careful dark eyes. I walked back through the gate. That was either very brave or very chaotic, Siwon said as I passed him. Both, I said. They're not mutually exclusive. He laughed, warm and genuine, and fell into step beside me as we moved back toward the kitchen. Minjae appeared on my other side without announcement, and I became aware of the three of them moving around me the way water moves around something it has decided to surround, not constraining, just present, just close. And my omega instincts, which had been making various embarrassing observations all morning, went entirely and completely unhelpful in response. In the kitchen, I sat back on the bar stool. The pregnancy test was still on the counter. The morning light had shifted, coming in at a different angle now, warmer than before. Taeoh stood across from me and looked at me for a long moment. What happens now? He said. Now your legal team files the protective documentation, I said. We establish my position on JT Holdings as an uninformed registration, which protects me and actually strengthens your acquisition case because it demonstrates procedural irregularity on the original filing. I looked at him steadily. And then, when Daehyun has had time to actually think, we negotiate a co-parenting arrangement that prioritizes this baby over every merger in Korea. And us? Siwon said. I turned to look at him. What about you? He gestured between himself and his brothers with easy confidence. Yes, we've been in your orbit for one morning, and we've already committed legal resources, hosted a confrontation, and emotionally invested in your situation to a degree that I think warrants some kind of formal acknowledgement. You're very dramatic, I told him. I'm very serious, he said, and the lightness in his voice had dropped just enough to mean it. I looked at Minjae, who said nothing but held my gaze with that quiet, steady quality of his that said more than most people managed with entire speeches. I looked at Taeoh, who was watching me with that expression I'd been trying to name all morning, the one that arrived every time I did something he hadn't predicted. I had a name for it now. It was the expression of someone who had decided something and was waiting to see if the other person had decided it too. Something warm moved through my chest. Something that had nothing to do with strategy or legal filings or corporate acquisitions. One condition, I said. Name it, Taeoh said. Nobody makes any decisions about my life without asking me first. I looked at all three of them. Not about where I stay, what I sign, or what I eat. Especially not what I eat, Siwon. I saw you pull that coffee mug back. Siwon pressed a hand to his chest. I was being considerate. Ask first, I said. He grinned, wide and completely unrepentant. Ha's deal. Minjae's hand came to rest beside mine on the counter again, closer than before, and this time his fingers brushed mine, brief and warm and entirely deliberate. I looked at his hand, then his face. He looked back without flinching, without performing, just open and steady and certain in that quiet way of his that made the whole room feel like it had taken a breath. I turned my hand over. His fingers closed around mine. Taeoh reached across the counter and tucked a strand of hair from my face with a gentleness so unhurried it almost undid me, his thumb resting for one warm second against my cheekbone before dropping away. "Hungry?" he asked. "Genuinely starving," I said. "Good." He moved toward the refrigerator with calm purpose. "Sit there and don't argue with anything for 5 minutes." "That's a bold request," I said. "It's a humble one," Minjae said quietly beside me. And I turned to look at him so fast he almost smiled. Almost. The corner of his mouth curved, small and private, just for me, and it was somehow the most devastating thing that had happened all morning. Siwon dropped onto the stool on my other side, shoulder brushing mine comfortably, like we'd been doing this for years. He propped his chin in one hand and looked at me with bright, genuine warmth. "For what it's worth," he said, "I think you're going to be a remarkable father." Something in my chest went very quiet. Not the anxious quiet from this morning. Not the held breath quiet of waiting for something to go wrong. The other kind. The kind that arrives when you are exactly where you are supposed to be, even if the path that brought you there was absurd and involved a pregnancy test on a kitchen counter and a business card you'd carried in your pocket for 6 weeks without knowing why. Outside, my soul moved through its morning. The Seongbuk-dong trees were still. The Han River was somewhere south of us, catching the winter light. And in this kitchen, something was beginning. Not a resolution. Not a neat ending tied with a bow. A beginning. The kind that felt earned. The kind that had been paid for in honesty and cold air and one very strategic phone call at 7:43 in the morning. I looked down at the pregnancy test on the counter. 2 lines. I pressed my hand against my stomach, just lightly, just for a moment. "Okay," I said softly, to myself and to the room and to whatever came next. "Let's do this." From the refrigerator, Taeoh said without turning around. "Together." It wasn't a question. It wasn't a promise either, not the fragile performative kind. It was just a fact, stated plainly by a man who meant what he said and said only what he meant. I smiled. For the first time all day, fully, genuinely. Ours without strategy or survival in it. Just that. Just this. Just us. The end. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed it, you'll definitely love the next one. It's even wilder and more intriguing than you can imagine, so be sure to check it out and hit subscribe. The next story drops soon.